All right, Caitlin, it looks like we're live. So good evening or late afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to our industry town hall. I'm your host, Juliette Abdel, President and CEO of the Westminster Chamber of Commerce. If you've landed on here, then you're in luck because Caitlin is full of so much resources and information that I'm excited to have her on here with us. We've got a bunch of videos that we've been highlighting, and these videos are dedicated toward educating you about a specific skill set that you need for your business or about business implications and issues that have rose from, COVID-19 and dealing with it. So our first industry town hall that we had was a little over 2 weeks ago. We'll be posting that onto our YouTube page for those of you that were unable to participate in that or to listen in. And this industry town hall is featuring Front Range Pharmogic. So again, I have with me Caitlin that's here. Caitlin will introduce herself, kind of her role with the organization, and share with us a little bit about what they generally do, how they've been affected by COVID-19, and maybe what's ahead, or what we're looking outwardly if you can see what's ahead in the unknown. So if you have questions, I'm going to reemphasize that again. This is now broadcast on our Facebook. So if you're watching this on Facebook, you can post questions and comments in the comment section, and we'll get to those at the end of this broadcast. If you're listening in, you can message us the questions that you have. Message us directly at our chamber line. That's 303-961-5975. And with that, I'll have Caitlin take it away.
Well, thank you, Julia. And I just want to say a quick thank you to the folks on the phone and, of course, the Westminster Chamber for putting on these webinars and for the opportunity to talk about some of the really important things that the biopharmaceutical industry is doing in response to coronavirus. As Juliette said, my name is Caitlin Lucarello. I am the Director of State Policy for Pharma, the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America. And Pharma represents the country's leading biopharmaceutical research firms. So some of the folks that the group Front Range Pharmogic are also members of theirs, are members of ours, and we're kind of the national organization for the industry. I personally have lived in Colorado for most of my life, and I have seen the growth of the biopharmaceutical sector here, as I'm sure that many of you business owners have as well recently. In 2017, the sector supported about 45,000 jobs here in Colorado. And while it's not the biggest sector, it's certainly experiencing really significant growth. And I wouldn't be surprised if that number was quite a bit higher in 2020 than it was in 2017. This is a really unique and important time for the industry in Colorado, and not just in Colorado and globally. I personally have been in the industry for over a decade, and what's happening right now is just tremendous. I've really never been prouder to be part of this industry or more excited about the work that's going on. There's really enormous upfront costs and risks associated with responding to a public health emergency, given the many uncertainties involved. And our member companies have really stepped up to the plate to address those challenges as they relate to coronavirus. So I'd love to talk to you today about some of the things that biopharma is doing here in the US to help confront some of the challenges as they relate to coronavirus. Our members, as I'm sure that you've been keeping track of the news, have made a really significant investment in research and development. More than half of our members right now are researching or developing or testing a potential treatment or vaccine for coronavirus. And from the start, our member companies really they dedicated their top scientists to decoding and sequencing the virus, and really quickly went to work scrutinizing the inventories of existing research portfolios that we had and existing libraries of experimental medicines to identify if there were any existing treatments out there that we could use for clinical trial investigation or emergency use with the coronavirus. Another thing our member companies are doing and did right away was beginning to expand manufacturing capabilities. They're sharing some of their available capacity with one another so that once we do have a successful vaccine developed, we can immediately ramp up production on that vaccine. So, I think it's worthwhile to put some numbers kind of on the magnitude of the effort. And it's so interesting because it is changing and growing every day. Just to give you an idea, I started off with statistics from April 8th, and on April 8th, we had more than 300 global clinical trials going on for coronavirus treatments and vaccines. As of yesterday, we have more than 400 trials. So just to give you an idea of how quickly the industry is responding in this effort, it's growing exponentially every week. Of those clinical trials, about 25%, 80 of those trials are taking place here in the US. So a really incredible effort on behalf of our companies that are located here as well. Another thing that we're doing is we're collaborating like we never have before within our industry and with the relevant public health agencies here and abroad. So a few of the authorities that we've partnered with recently, including working between our own companies, are the FDA, the CDC, the WHO, and then early in the response, our member companies were working with Chinese public health authorities to start addressing the public health crisis as it started there. Another amazing part of this collaboration has really just been an unprecedented knowledge share between companies and in real time with researchers and other health authorities, which has really helped us step up the efforts and move knowledge faster and move into research and development on a vaccine faster as well. In addition to this kind of tireless work, I think that our researchers are really real heroes right now because they are truly working day and night on treatments and vaccines for this disease. Our member companies recognize the need for monetary and in-kind support. And so they have donated, tens of millions of dollars of direct monetary support to US and global relief efforts. And they've also donated a variety of critical supplies. I think we're hearing a lot in the news recently about personal protective equipment and medical supplies. And disinfecting equipment. And, we looked internally and said, okay, we have some of those resources that we can spare, and donated those to people on the front line and communities in need. And also, globally as well, to some of those global efforts as well. On that same line, in addition to donating some of those supplies, our members have been really great about donating some of those investigational medicines that I talked about earlier that have the potential to treat coronavirus and be used for emergency use or for clinical trials. And so they've donated millions of dollars worth of those investigational medicines so that clinical trials can take place on those around the world. And what's interesting, I think, about those investigational medicines that already existed is that we do know that there is a certain amount of effectiveness there with other coronaviruses like MERS and SARS, but we also know that there's some effectiveness with other viruses that are really complex like HIV and Ebola. So, looking into our own inventory, I think is a great, has given us a great kind of head start to not, in all cases, reinvent the wheel. Mm-hmm. I think in all of this as well, there are concerns about, from our industry, about the integrity of the pharmaceutical supply chain. And I know that sounds like kind of wonky language, but I think we see it on the news all the time. We hear about the potential for inappropriate stockpiling or shortages of drugs, and those all speak to the integrity of the supply chain. So our members have really been working to make sure that they ramp up manufacturing to address increases in the demand of certain drugs as well. And we've been working with the FDA to work to prevent and mitigate any shortages of drugs before they arise. I think the other thing to know when it comes to shortages and stockpiling is that our companies have really robust inventory management systems, and those can help us identify inappropriate stockpiling or increased use of medicines in advance of a shortage. And so really help us get in front with manufacturing of any potential shortages in supply or any breaks in the supply chain.
So I know we've got a few people that have hopped on the video. If you have just come and you're starting to watch this broadcast, we have with us today Front Range Pharmologic, Caitlin, and she's sharing a little bit about the industry, what they've experienced in wake of COVID, how they've been responding, and maybe things that they've implemented. We've got several people that have dialed in. For those of you that are dialed in, you can submit your questions to us by text. That's 303-961-5975. Those of you that are watching this on our Facebook platform, thank you to State Representative Tracy Kraft-Tharp, Parker, and Jessica, and several others that are on here. Please continue to listen. I've already taken so much notes. I know I have some questions. So if you have any questions and you're watching this on Facebook, just drop us a comment. Let us know what it is so we can get to it.
Thank you, Juliet. And one question I hear often about our efforts is, okay, we've heard before it usually takes 10 to 15 years to bring a drug to market. Why is this treatment and why is this or vaccines for coronavirus moving so quickly? Mm-hmm. And I think that the answer to that question really has to do with kind of a perfect combination of things that have been going on in the industry to bring us to this point right now. Mm-hmm. And some of those things are, the industry has developed over the past several decades a really deep scientific knowledge about epidemics and public health emergencies. We have really significant experience with similar viruses. We just had experience with developing vaccines, for instance, for Ebola in Africa. We have, over decades been also investing in technologies that allow us to more quickly decode and sequence viruses so that we can work to develop a potential vaccine. And one of the really cool technologies that's up and coming right now is something, and really relevant right now, is something called adjuvant. And adjuvant is a booster that gets added to a vaccine, which actually reduces the amount of the vaccine protein that's required for the vaccine to be effective. And so it allows our industry to produce more doses and ultimately means that we can protect more people with less of that actual protein, which is pretty incredible. Mm-hmm. In concert with these same kind of forces which have allowed us to move really quickly on this effort, I just can't say enough about the collaboration among not just American companies, but companies, biopharmaceutical manufacturers globally and healthcare stakeholders globally, and the importance of that knowledge share has been irreplaceable, I think, in the response to this virus.
And that's an interesting point there are several interesting points that you just made in this. I mean, when you talked about, how it's 10 to 15 years that it generally takes for a vaccination to come on the market. And when we're hearing from people right now, they're demanding that there's a solution tomorrow or that there really was yesterday. And to see that it's getting so much more expedited, that's something that a lot of consumers, I think the public just kind of needs more awareness on, is that this is moving a lot faster than it generally would in the system.
Yeah, and again, that just is because of this kind of perfect combination of knowledge in the industry, technology that we've been investing in for decades, and then the ability to share information and gain knowledge from other folks in real time has really helped us speed up the development of this vaccine. I think also, before I close and before I take some comments, I want to make sure that I take the opportunity while I'm here to talk about some of the resources that we've made available during this time to address some of the, I think, ongoing and maybe even more significant now, access and affordability issues around medications. I know there's a lot of people out there that struggle to afford their medicines. This is certainly a tough time for many folks right now. And Pharma does have a number of resources that we offer to help address some of those challenges. So one of the really cool tools that we've put together recently is called the Medication Assistance Tool. We built it with some of our other member companies in the last year, and it basically provides a centralized location where patients, caregivers, and healthcare providers can go find information about financial assistance for medicines. I have actually used it before myself. You go on to mat.org and you select whether you're a patient, you're a caregiver, you're a provider, and the medicines that you're interested in, and the tool will return to you information about the list price of that drug, out-of-pocket cost information, and then patient assistance information that's available to help make it easier to afford that prescription. Which is fantastic. And, I think that we really, obviously we're in a really significant time right now, but the issues of access and affordability to prescription drugs is still ongoing. And so we have also partnered with a group called healthcareready.org, and we have provided some financial support and in-kind donations to them of medicines and critical medical supplies. And they really provide a central coordination point to ensure that patients and providers on the front lines can access medicines and supplies and make sure that basically triaging those supplies and medicines to make sure that they get to who they need to get to in a crisis.
I think those are awesome, two great resources, and I will definitely pull them and add them to our COVID-19 update webpage so people have access to that. On that note, it kind of reminded me that, during this time when a lot of people have had interruption in their health insurance and things like that, Connect for Health allowed for that special period for you to be able to go on and sign up. So if you're one of those people that's affected, know that that's an option for you. Our chamber also has prescription health cards that are available at no cost. So if you would like to access those, we have those digitally. We also have them in print. So if you need any of those cards, they act like coupons up to, I think, 85% off of the retail dollar amount of your regular script. And then last spring, we actually partnered with another health alliance to be able to offer small business type of health insurance programs. So a lot less cost than you would if you buy it on your own in the marketplace, and you don't have to be entering in your information only in the open enrollment period. So all of those are really good resources. I think you just raised a terrific point, Caitlin, that we'll create kind of a one-sheeter and attach it to this video. And I'll also link the two web pages that you mentioned, the medical assistance tool so people can calculate the cost of their scripts, and then this healthcareready.org that you just mentioned. We do have a question already that's come in, and it's with regard to the supply chain of many of our drugs or drug components. They come from China and other nations. So has regulation here pushed production of those materials overseas?
No, it certainly hasn't. And I think it's important to recognize, we get our materials from all over the world, and China certainly is one of those places. We do our absolute, the FDA oversees the manufacturing facilities in China, and we do have, good faith in what's coming out of those facilities abroad in terms of ingredients. We're also, certainly working to make sure that we continue to think about the supply chain as as coronavirus progresses. And as I mentioned, it's not a concern right now in terms of shortages or breaks in the supply chain. And we haven't had any major inventory interruptions, but certainly something that we're keeping an eye on as an industry. And I can't speak to whether it should be moved here. I think that, this is a global crisis right now, and we're trying to work with as many global partners as possible to address it.
So on the note of global and support from some of the key nations around the world, I think it was last March, so end of March, we had the FDA clear the emergency use of malaria pills to treat COVID-19. Are you aware of whether or not that was just kind of more hopefulness, or if any of those trial efforts panned out as we had expected?
Yeah, so as I understand it, there's actually no treatments currently approved or therapeutics currently approved for the treatment of coronavirus. I think that we hear every day about clinical trials that are producing really good results. Right now, the treatments that we're working with really have to do with addressing symptoms and complications in patients, and that's oxygen therapy, ventilators, and then trying to prevent from any infections using antibiotics. So there's really currently no approved therapeutics for coronavirus, but certainly some promising studies going on out there for sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned 400 trials that are currently going on, 25% of which are taking place here in the US. Do you know the disbursement of where those are taking place? Are they centralized in specific areas that COVID has hit harder? Or has it just kind of been where some of your medical or pharmaceutical companies are located?
Yeah, in terms of the populations of the clinical trials, I'm not real sure about exactly where, which populations they're looking at. I know our companies tend to be clustered on the coast, and of course we're trying to increase our presence here in Colorado. So it's hard to say exactly where those are taking place right now. There's also the clinical trials typically take place in a laboratory setting, and then I know that there's some research going on with select groups of people, which is probably in more of like a hospital or healthcare setting. I will say that of the 70 vaccines right now that are in development, so there's 400 clinical trials, 70 vaccines, there can be multiple clinical trials for a vaccine. 6 vaccines are in the early phases of human testing, which means that they're, ahead of the pack for being the most promising potential treatment out there.
And it looks like one question that we just had really just asked for you to expand on the inappropriate stockpiling. And I think this came from, we saw this with hoarding of even things that weren't essential. You saw it with toilet paper, people were doing that. You see it with thermometers, people do that, and then they're turning around and either selling it at a crazy amount or just keeping that for their own peace of mind or whatever other reason they might be. So can you go in detail about how that system flags, that there is some sort of inappropriate stockpiling going on, and what measures are taken to stop that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so there's a couple of ways that we track potential shortages and stockpiling. So one, our individual biopharmaceutical companies have inventory management systems that are extremely complex and sensitive to changes in demand. And the other thing that we do is reporting to the FDA. Manufacturers are actually required by the FDA to report any advance or any indication that there could be any shortages to kind of get a jump on addressing those shortages before they happen. I should say, although inappropriate stockpiling is a concern, and I think it's also a concern that inappropriate prescribing and promoting of certain drugs that haven't been, proven effective in clinical trials yet. I should say that there haven't been any major shortages. We do know there have been a couple localized shortages, but again, our manufacturers have really stepped up their manufacturing to meet those increases in demand.
Absolutely. And we've got some more people that just kind of hopped on. If you just hopped on, know that this is one of our 2 town halls that we've done. We have 2 more scheduled: behavioral health, COPA, and several others coming up in the next few weeks. Today we have Caitlin from Front Range Pharmologic, and I think this is a great segue, Caitlin, for you to talk a little bit about, we reference your members throughout this conversation, and a lot of times when we start talking about pharmaceuticals and things like that, people are thinking big pharma, they're thinking those larger entities and things of that nature. Can you tell us a little bit about who you're working with primarily and what that makeup looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So please visit pharma.org, phrma.org. Pharma has a number of members in the biopharmaceutical space. We don't have a size requirement for you to be part of our trade organization. So we have large and small companies as members. One thing that we do require is we do have a minimum amount that our companies have to reinvest into research and development. So that is a barrier, can be a barrier to entry for some, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you. It looks like Brad Beck and Matthew have hopped on, Jerry and several other people. It's always nice to do different videos at different times. We capture a different audience that's on here. Was there anything else you wanted to close out with, Caitlin, as it relates to what you guys are doing? I know we touched a little bit on the immediate response that your industry's taken. This quickly opened up and it absorbed the public, and now you're trying to be proactive and coming up with solutions, whether they be clinical trials to eventually discover a vaccine or ways that we can mitigate this. But looking ahead, are some of your members or some of your companies more affected than others, even as they are in the process of R&D?
Yeah, I think we obviously have several member companies that are actively developing and researching treatments and vaccines. And so they're very much in the trenches of combating coronavirus right now. I think really in the industry right now and in the near future, what's next is just a shared goal of developing and researching medications and vaccines that we can use to fight coronavirus.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon to be here. If you guys had questions and you didn't get a chance to ask them, or you came on late in the game, the video is on here for you to watch at any time, for you to share with your followers as well. And if you think of something, I know Caitlin is pretty active online, and we'll see that. I will send that over to her. We'll get your questions answered. And just know that if this is a replay, there are solutions, or people are trying to develop solutions to what we're facing today. And I thank Caitlin for taking some time out of her afternoon to be on here with us. Corky from Colorado Assisted Living was supposed to be on here, but due to technical difficulties, he could not. So we'll try and get them on another stream as well. And be sure to tune in with us tomorrow at 11 a.m. We have our state updates with State Representative Shannon Bird and State Senator Dominic Moreno at 11 a.m. here on our Facebook page. They'll be sharing, what has the state done in response to COVID-19, what they've seen kind of come through since our last state updates, and what's ahead for them. So again, we'll be on here tomorrow at 11 a.m. Thank you so much for tuning in, to everyone that either called in or hopped on to our Facebook page. And Caitlin, I hope you have a wonderful evening and somewhat find some peace in the evening before tomorrow starts back up.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me here.
Bye.